BMW has finally built an estate-bodied M3. The M3 Touring has four-wheel drive, 503 brake horsepower and a list price of £86,570. But it's not the original high-performance 3 Series estate, not even close. Legendary BMW tuner Alpina has been building them for decades, while BMW itself has long produced potent versions of the 3 Series estate. So is the full-blown M car the one to have, or are you better off with an Alpina B3 or a BMW M3 40i?
To answer that question, we first need to get beneath the skin of this car, the BMW M3 Touring with xDrive, that's its full name. First things first, in terms of curbside appeal, this car does hit a lot of the right notes. It's got presence. You might not love the way it looks from the front, I still don't. But it's got attitude, it's dripping with presence, the stance looks fantastic. This interior is also really high quality. It is just a 3 Series cabin, but some of the switchgear is bespoke, there's lots of carbon, red leather. I think it looks fantastic in here. These seats are controversial. You don't have to have them, they're an optional extra. But they're very bony, sort of thinly padded. They're not big comfy armchairs by any means. I'm okay with them. Other people hate this big lump in the middle. I'm not too keen on these thigh bolsters. I think they're a bit uncomfortable. But they're supportive, and really in an M car, that's probably the most important consideration. We do need to talk about ride comfort because it's a bit of a theme of this video, as we'll see. It's not terrible. If you're expecting it to be a bone shaker to rattle you to pieces, I think you're going to be surprised. I have currently got the suspension in the comfort mode, so this is the softest, most easygoing mode, and the ride is good. Okay, there's plenty of spring rate, so you are sort of constantly being jiggled about a little bit. Your head gets tossed about, you do feel bumps in the road, but there is a classiness to the damping that means it doesn't become really harsh. It never rattles you to pieces, and I think that's really quite clever of BMW's chassis engineers. What all that spring rate gives you is taut body control. So over an undulating road, the body doesn't go light, it's not struggling to contain its own masses. In corners, there's really not very much body roll at all. So you have this sense of immediacy, this body control that makes the car feel agile, alert. It's almost 1900 kilograms, this car. Doesn't really feel it. The steering is in sport mode, and even then it's pretty light. It's not exactly dripping with feedback, but it is super sharp. It is pin sharp. So you just guide the car with such assuredness, such confidence. It really is very clever steering. There's no question it feels like an M car. I mean, you want some edge, don't you, in an M car? You want to know that you're in a very special high-performance car with 500 odd horsepower, and the way this goes down the road, yeah, you're in no doubt. It deals with a bumpy surface really very well indeed. That is super impressive. The four-wheel drive system, do you know, it just doesn't feel four-wheel drive. You're not aware of the front axle sharing the load. It just feels like a rear drive car in its balance, the way it gets into a corner. Feels like a rear drive car, except that it never ever runs out of traction. We've had some terrible weather today. The roads have been really wet at times, and the traction is just supreme. Engine, twin turbo, so you know it's never going to sound really special, is it? But it's pretty good. Foot down in third gear, and it just goes, and it pulls to the top end. Yeah, it's a lively, energetic kind of turbo engine. I really like it. We don't have a dual clutch gearbox in this car. Some people say it's a big problem. I think it's okay, you know. It's not super snappy like you get with a DCT, but for an auto, I think it's fine. For me, it's not getting in the way of the driving experience. So this car doesn't beat you up in normal driving. Not by any means does it beat you up, but you are aware that it is a full-blown M car. It's not as though those M characteristics fade away in normal driving. There's plenty of tyre roar. The ride is a little bit lumpy. These seats are pretty bony and not exactly really cushioned like an armchair. So you know you're in a fairly purposeful kind of machine. And I reckon if you're buying an M car, that's probably what you want, isn't it?
The M340i carries M badges, but it's not a full M car. Still, it has a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine producing 369 brake horsepower, 4-wheel drive and a much subtler, less aggressive look. Best of all, it's more than £25,000 cheaper than the M3.
So it's less money, a lot less money, but are you getting a lot less car with this M340i? You're certainly getting less in the turbo department. This is the only single turbo car here. The other two are twin turbo. So let's start there. Let's start with the engine. It pulls really well. It does. It pulls really well. But after that M3 with its twin turbos and 500 horsepower, it does feel a little bit anemic. In isolation, if you're just spending time with this car alone, you're going to think it's plenty quick enough, I reckon. You really are. But when you compare it to these two with much more power, yeah, it does start to feel just a bit sort of mediocre. But it's a good engine. It's really crisp. It's really sharp. It's actually quite a restrained, almost muted soundtrack, but there is a lovely inline 6 kind of howl to it. I like that. And again, we've got an 8-speed auto gearbox. For me, it works pretty well. And actually, in this M340i, a more sort of easygoing, slightly more sedate kind of performance car, I miss a dual clutch gearbox even less. What you really notice though, when you jump out of the M3 and into this one, is just how sort of easygoing the car feels. The ride quality, for one thing, is so much smoother than the M3's. All the time, it's just more serene, it's calmer, you're not getting jiggled about, your head's not getting rocked about all over the place. And over a very bumpy road, the ride in this car is actually really impressive. It just deals with the bumps beautifully. Again, very similar sort of 4-wheel drive system, rear biased, only really tickles the front axle when the rear wheels are about to lose grip. So that works really effectively. The steering, again, it's quite like the M3's, unsurprisingly, I suppose. Light, not exactly wriggling in your fingertips with detailed feedback. None of that stuff, to be honest. But it doesn't seem to matter. You put the car where you want it. But the most surprising thing about it is how fun it is to drive. You jump out of that M3 into this thing and you think, well, it's just going to be a bit tame. It really isn't. There is a crispness about it, a sweetness about how it handles, about the steering, about the ride, about the sense of balance. It's really enjoyable to punt it down a B road. I wasn't expecting that at all. I've had a lot of fun in this thing today. It's nothing like as sort of thrilling, as exciting, as engaging as the M3, but it's really good fun to drive. I'm surprised at how little driver enjoyment you're actually giving up compared to the full-blown M car. And in terms of everyday use, this M340i is actually streets ahead of the M3. But I wonder where the Alpina B3 fits in amongst these two. Maybe it's the best of both worlds. Maybe it does combine the performance, the sense of purpose of the M3 with the comfort, the luxury, the refinement of this M340i. I suppose we better go find out.
After all, it doesn't look as angry as the M3, and Alpinas have always been much more comfort-minded than their M car equivalents. Taking the M340i as its starting point, the B3 is also 4-wheel drive. Its 6-cylinder twin-turbo produces 488 brake horsepower. At 80,700 pounds, it undercuts the M3 by almost £6,000.
This car has what I think is my favourite driving mode of any car on sale at the moment. Comfort Plus, which it describes as the extra comfortable setting. I must be getting old. We don't need it today though. Let's get it into one of the sport modes and see what this Alpina B3 is all about. What a wonderful spec this car is. Dark green with the subtle decals, the beautiful Alpina multi-spoke wheels, this gorgeous dark brown leather. It looks fantastic. For me, it's the best looking car in the trio. It also has the nicest leather steering wheel. It's so soft and smooth. It's so nice to hold. Huge fan of the interior and the way this car looks. It's a gorgeous thing. And I'm also a huge fan of the ride quality. I don't know how Alpina do it. I mean, seriously. In that Comfort Plus mode, it is supreme. It's so smooth, so comfy. It's as though you are always driving on a perfectly flat, smooth road surface. And today, we are definitely not. Some of these roads are dreadful, but it's so calm and comfortable. It does have the best ride of any car here. And that's good not just for comfort, but also when you are having fun on a road, because it has this pliancy. It deals with a bad road surface so well. It just smothers the bumps in the road, so the body's not getting skipped around all over the place. It works really well. Maybe not so much the steering. Again, it's light, it's quick, it's accurate, but there is a slight glassy feel, a slight disconnect. It's a little bit vague, maybe. I think the other two have slightly sharper, more incisive steering. But that doesn't stop you having fun in this car. It really, really doesn't. Winding B roads, plenty of grip out here, good visibility, and you can have a lot of fun in this Alpina B3. It feels agile, doesn't feel as heavy as it is, it's responsive, it's got good balance like the other two, massive traction of course, it's also four-wheel drive. But from a handling point of view, it's definitely more M3 40i than M3. It doesn't have the edge, it doesn't have that final degree of sharpness that you get in the M3. It is more like the other car. So rather than really take it by the scruff and fling it along the road, you sort of stroke it along a bit. What it does have is massive torque. It doesn't have quite the same power as the M3. There isn't much in it, but it's got massive torque. You have this really strong mid-range. Once you've got the turbos really blowing, oh, it just gets going so forcefully. There, yeah, it punches you along the road really hard. It's a rocket ship, actually. Maybe there isn't quite the same live wire buzz at the top end. It's actually the same engine as the M3, but with Alpina specific tuning. And I suppose it would suit an Alpina to have more of a mid-range, more urgency through there than a razor-sharp top end. I didn't mind the M3's auto box when I was driving it, but of all the three cars, the M3 is the one that is just slightly at odds with its transmission, because it is a harder-edged car, it is a more focused thing, but it doesn't have that DCT transmission to draw that final bit of character out of it. And so I'm happier with the transmissions in this Alpina and the M3 40i. As an everyday car, and forgetting cost for the moment, for me, it's all about this one, the B3, this Alpina. It's just stunning. It's really good fun to drive. It's massively quick. It's got great stability in bad weather, a lovely interior, outrageous ride comfort and noise suppression. It's a proper Grand Tourer, and it's a little bit different. It's not just another BMW. But I reckon we should go and find Andrew Frankel, my TI co-founder, and see what he reckons of these three cars.
If you're in the market for a fast estate, or any luxury or performance car for that matter, why not see what our car finance partner JBR Capital can do for you? We work with JBR Capital because we believe they understand what it means to be a car enthusiast. Customers get a personalised service, not a one-size-fits-all approach. And if you call JBR Capital today, you'll speak to an actual person who will help you put together a finance package that suits you. Click the link beneath this video to find out more.
It's turned into quite a nice day, actually, Andrew, but as you can see from all these puddles and the filth on the cars, it was rotten earlier.
It was.
But in a way, that's a good test for these three cars, I suppose.
Real world.
A trio of high-performance 3 Series Touring.
Yep.
On paper, quite similar cars, but actually different characters, really.
Yeah. So we have the M3 40i, the Alpina B3, and of course the M3 Touring. Fascinating comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, is it what you expected them to be?
I don't know. Actually, what surprised me is how different the cars feel in character, right? So this one turned up to my house a few days ago, and it pulled up on my driveway, and I thought, wow, that's got a lot of presence.
Yeah.
I'm still not convinced by all of this, but
I quite like it.
It's a tough looking car. It feels pretty upmarket inside. We have to mention, this has got 20 odd grand's worth of options on it. So as it sits here, that's a £103,000 car.
Yeah.
That's a lot more, certainly, than the middle one, isn't it, the M340i?
Yeah, the M340i, I mean, that's got a few bits and pieces on it. This is a car that I've lived with for the last 6 months. I've done, blimey, about 14,000 miles on it. So I know it quite well.
Yes.
And it's about £60,000, maybe 65 with the bits on it, but it's 2/3 the price of this.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably about the same above the Alpina.
So let's talk about the M3 quickly, because this is why we're here, really, because finally BMW has done an M3 Touring.
Yeah.
But actually the point of this test today is that you've been able to buy a high performance BMW 3 Series Touring for quite a long time, but this is the first M car, the most sort of single-minded car of the three.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't think I'm betraying any secrets here. It's the one that you would choose if you just want to drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. The powertrain in it is amazing, but there's a price to pay. You know, this is a Touring. This is an estate car, and I guess the question is whether you want to put up with, particularly the ride comfort, but also there are some refinement issues for, you know, which you're going to experience every time you get in the car. For those, frankly, fairly rare occasions when you're going to be able to be driving this in a way that you couldn't be driving the other two.
Yes.
That's the question with this car.
Yeah.
And to certain people, they'll love the look of it. It does look very dramatic. Coming up in your, you know, there's all sorts of things that we know about these sorts of cars and BMWs and why people like them. That's really going to tune into. And you can put your dog in the back and it'll take your family and everything. I completely get it. But I'm just not sure that what that adds very occasionally is enough to justify the price. And when you have a car like the M340i, which does so much of what this does, but without really many of the downsides.
Okay, and we have to remember, we've got 3 Tourings here, 3 estates, right? And that's important because they're everyday cars.
Meant to be.
They're practical family cars, really. So let's move on a little bit, because the M340i, given how, in theory, you'd imagine these cars would be used, it's more easygoing than the M3.
Yeah.
It rides better, it's got better refinement.
It uses a lot less fuel. And even if you don't care about the money, you'll probably care about just how much time you have to, you know, spend between fuel stops.
Yeah.
I mean, I drove this for 4,500 miles around Europe, and it was doing 400 miles on a tank, and I just love that. You wouldn't get that in either of the other two.
Yes, that is true. I was surprised at how enjoyable this car was to drive, right? I got out of the M3 directly into this, expecting it to feel wallowy and limp and slow.
No.
It really doesn't.
Not a poor relation, is it?
No.
I mean, you can see the other two, for reasons we will get to. We've already spoken about the M3 and we'll talk about the Alpina in a minute. They do have things, they do stuff that this doesn't. But you don't get back into this and think, oh, well, yeah, that's, you know, they're 100 grand cars and this is a 60 grand car, and it shows. It doesn't at all. It's still fast. It's still a really nice place to be. It still handles really well. And yet it's quiet and it's comfortable and it works. That's why, you know, when I look back at all the cars I've been able to run all over the year, that will have a special place in my heart just because it has just fitted into my life. So it's the kind of car you just take for granted.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a sense of occasion car. It's just a car that is out there and it works and you don't have to think about it. And every journey you do in it is just pleasant, easy, relaxed, fun. It's exactly what I want. And I think that most people who have these sorts of cars, they've got other stuff as well, haven't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe they just want something which does all the, you know, the family stuff. And then, you know, if they want to go and enjoy themselves, they've got other toys to go and play with.
I think for me, you have to be absolutely convinced that you will use the M3's added dynamism, that you will make the most of its extra performance, because otherwise it's just going to annoy you a bit more than this one would.
I mean, as I said, you know, the ride in particular, it's just a bit, what word do you use? Edgy, I think is the word you use. Edgy. You're always aware of it. It never quite settles down. Whereas this is just, I mean, it's not a limousine. It's still quite firm, but it's nuanced and it's easy and it's relaxed and it's comfortable. You know, I'm really, really glad I did those 4,500 miles in this rather than an M3 Touring, because if I'd spent day after day after day sat on European motorways and that, I'd have got cheesed off.
Okay, talking about thousands of miles on the motorway, would you though take this one, given the choice?
Yeah, in a heartbeat. Yes, of course I would. Yeah, because the Alpina, it's kind of like, it's quite like the M3 Touring, but with another degree of specialness added onto it.
Yeah.
And so much of that is to do with the way they tune their chassis. This car, even though it's got, it's got big wheels and very low profile tires, it just rides beautifully, doesn't it? You just get into it, and that provides a sense of, I'm going to use this word again, and I hate it, specialness, which is every bit as real as that you get in the M3 Touring when you're driving it like your hair's on fire.
Yeah.
But that you get to enjoy all the time. Every time you get into that and you just sit and you relax and you wander off down the road, it just feels right.
Same engine as the M3, but actually different tuning, different character, different power and torque delivery.
And that, I think, is its only drawback. I love doing these things because you always find out stuff. And I would have thought that we'd be sitting here talking about the mid-range response of this car. Actually, this has a lot more torque than the M3. It has more torque low down than the M3, but there's lag. There's a pause. You have to wait before it'll go whoom.
Yeah.
Whereas actually the M3, which has a lot less mid-range torque and a bit more power at the top end, it's much more responsive. Neither of them are as responsive as the M340i because it has a lot less boost, and so it behaves much more like a naturally aspirated engine. But I think if this car has a weak point, it is you just want instant throttle response and you don't get it. That to me is really the only drawback with this car.
Yeah.
When the torque comes, it's magnificent. There's a huge wave and it goes on and you're off. But you do have to, you do have to kind of play its game and wait for the turbos to spool up, and that did surprise me a bit.
I've got a clear winner in this test, I really have. And I'm going to give my decision away, right?
Okay,
You're not. I take this every single time. Don't say a thing. I don't say a thing. I would take the Alpina every single time. I think it's a bit more unusual than the other two. I think it looks better than the other two. For me, it's got the best cabin. I love that ride comfort, that refinement. I still think it's fun to drive. We're not giving away exactly what you think because...
No, but now that you have, come clean, I'm much more interested in what you would place second.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very, very tough one. If I had to live with one for a year, and certainly if it was my own money, I'd choose the M340i.
Okay. Well, there you have it.
But there's clearly a fuller verdict to be written. Andrew's going to write that.
Yes.
Your story is already live, isn't it? The way these things work, it's already alive on the Intercooler website, the-intercooler.com. There is a link below. Go and read the story if you want to see our beautiful photos, find out exactly what Andrew thinks of those three cars. Please remember to subscribe to this channel because as far as the Intercooler is concerned on YouTube, we're just getting started. But thank you for watching our videos so far. Thank you for your really encouraging feedback. We appreciate it. We're going to do more, so stay tuned. Thank you.